Okay, Beverly, are we ready to start?
I believe so.
I've got live YouTube on the top of my screen.
Yes.
I have to. Yeah, it's all right.
Okay, Beverly?
Jim?
We're now live, Chair.
Thank you very much. Well, welcome to this virtual meeting of the Licensing Subcommittee. My name is Councillor Michael Goodridge, and although I'm not chairman of the committee yet, I'm told by my colleagues that I am destined for that under item 1 on the agenda. Members and visitors, please can you use the hand raise function within Zoom to indicate when you wish to speak. But having said that, we are going to have an order of speaking in any event. So it is not going to be like a normal committee meeting when everybody can pitch in, except of course my two colleagues who I will introduce. My two colleagues on this committee are Councillor Anna James and Councillor Roger Lishan, and the three of us will be deciding the matter. If any members in the meeting lose their connection temporarily, we will pause to allow them time to rejoin the meeting. And if the webcast stream fails, then we will also have to adjourn until we're able to reset the connection. I should mention that the committee has met briefly prior to this hearing to ensure that we're all familiar with the details of this application by Farnham Castle, and so we can establish areas of uncertainty on the paperwork and so on. No predetermination has taken place, and the discussion was held in the presence of Gillian Carson Jones. Somebody's clearly not muted. Could I ask everybody to mute themselves, please? Then we don't get background interference. No predetermination has taken place, and the discussion was held in the presence of Gillian Carson Jones, our lawyer, and monitored by Georgina Hall, the Democratic Services Officer, who are here. We all have our names up on the screen, so I don't think we need to do a mammoth introduction of everybody. That's one of the advantages of Zoom, I think, that we know who everybody is by looking at the screen. So having said that, I propose to start the meeting and start the agenda. And the first item on the agenda is the election of chairman. Do we have any nominations?
I nominate Michael Goodridge.
And I second it.
And I suppose that as there's only three of us, that sets the seal. So I'll be happy to act as chairman. I've already introduced myself and other members of the committee. There are, I think, at least one, if not two other councillors present. Councillor David Beeman, I think, should be here, who is one of the objectors and the local ward member on Waverley. And also Councillor Hess, George Hess, who I think is here in his capacity as a member of the Farnham Town Council and is going to be speaking on their behalf in due course. So far as officers are concerned, we have present Paul Hughes, who is known to everybody. He is here. Gillian Carson Jones, the litigation lawyer for licensing and regulations. We have Georgina Hall, who is Democratic Services Officer, and also Beverly, Democratic Services Officer as well. So and I don't think we have any other officers present. We are here to determine an application for a new premises license for Farnham Castle, Castle Street in Farnham, under the Licensing Act. And everybody, I think, certainly all the objectors and also the applicant have got the agenda, so you know you've got most of the paperwork that exists. Now, the hearing will be formal but relaxed and enable the committee to reach a judgment which, as far as possible, is acceptable to all the parties within the rules and guidelines imposed by the Licensing Act 2003. The subcommittee is meeting to consider the submissions and reach a judgment under the rules and guidance imposed by the Licensing Act 2003, and having regard to the Council's statement of licensing policy. I don't know whether the applicant and the wishes to introduce himself, but it's Phil Littlefair who is going to be speaking on behalf of the applicant. And then there are various objectors that we will come to at the appropriate time. I don't think we have any responsible authorities present at the meeting. Environmental Health have obviously had discussions with Farnham Castle and have reached a consensus as to 10 extra conditions. So I don't think they're here. Is that right? Georgina, I don't think we have anybody else present.
They're not present, no.
No. So could I now invite the licensing officer, Paul Hughes, to introduce the application and outline the matter that the subcommittee is being asked to decide.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. You have in front of you an application for a new premises licence for Farnham Castle, where 8 valid representations have been received from other persons. As you mentioned, both Environmental Health and Surrey Police, acting as responsible authorities, have agreed conditions with the applicant. These are attached to Annex 5 and 6. In brief, the applicants seek to licence the premises for regulated entertainment, which is films, plays, music, etc., from 10 till 0200 hours. Late night refreshment, which is the provision of hot food and hot drink, from 11 o'clock till 0200 hours, and the sale of alcohol. Farnham Castle currently holds a premises licence, which is attached to Annex 1. Officers request you consider the application. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And the difference being, Mr. Hughes, is that at the moment the licence is till 1 o'clock and they want to move it
Yes,
in all the categories 1 extra hour. Is that right?
Yes, basically that's it. There's conditions that are different, but the main difference is an increase on the hours, yes.
By 1 hour.
Yes.
Thanks very much. Do any members of the subcommittee have any questions of Mr. Hughes before we move on and ask the applicant to outline his case? Right. Would the applicant now like to outline their application? Mr. Littlefair.
Thank you, Chairman. I think good morning to all. I think from our perspective, one of the other areas of key factors to consider is what we're actually trying to do is provide the service for the residents as well. So sorry, Paul, there was an element of that was missed, which is the non-standard timings, which is the provision of 24-hour supply of alcohol to residents staying in the bedrooms, booked as part of the event at the premises as well. But that's one of the main crux of the application. The others are merely the extension of the hours from 1 a.m. to 2 a.m., but also bringing forward earlier ones from midday to 10 a.m. Which again, obviously, you all know farming in terms of what it is, in terms of its offering, in terms of a high-end wedding venue, and that just would allow us the flexibility to offer our bride and groom the ability for their guests to arrive at 11:30 for a 12 o'clock ceremony, and partake in an arrival beverage before the ceremony, before they go into the Great Hall or anything like that, for any weddings that we would host. And then the other elements are really just what we already are licensed for, with those slight extensions, apart from the late refreshments, which again is just hot food and hot drink past 11 o'clock in the evening, which we noticed upon our review was omitted from the previous license from when it was drafted. So just trying to address all items in one hearing, really. Thank you, Kevin.
Okay. So looking at, you've agreed, I think, some conditions in particular with environmental health.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've engaged with Jeanette Guy from Environmental Health throughout the process, throughout the earlier application. Obviously, it's now been delayed because of coronavirus, but throughout the application process, and the outgoing general manager, as of last Friday, has agreed these 10 conditions as part of the application. And
these conditions were put on to try and deal with the objections or the areas of concern raised by the objectors. Yeah, absolutely. I think it was to address and from the environmental health perspective, it was to address some of the objections and also to work through a solution. I think is the best way that works for both parties ahead of the hearing, because we want to be the responsible people and responsible operators for the venue. So from that side, it was no issues from our side in terms of engagement with Jeanette. That wasn't an issue at all, and they were all bottomed out in the last week prior to this hearing, which has led to Jeanette not needing to or not wanting to join the hearing today. Okay, I see one of the conditions. One of the problems that objectors have raised is the question of people sitting on the wall and throwing bottles or whatever down in the garden below. And the solution that's been put forward is to put a railing on the top of the wall. Mm. You're going to need planning for that, aren't you? Well, from a remedial process, I think not recently, but there's already a wire kind of around it to stop people from sitting on the wall and chatting and putting drinks on the wall and things like that, to try and prevent that, because we believe certainly it's not happened in my day of being involved with the castle in terms of that side of things. So from there, we've got it's a legacy issue that we've taken steps already to address, and if we need to go further, then we can obviously investigate that in some way. Okay, so just for my clarity, what position do you hold, and how long have you been doing it? So I am the finance director for the venues collection. So I have been with Compass for 2 years. Involved with the castle as one of my properties during this time. So you would be saying that over the last 2 years there haven't been problems that you're aware of bottles and things and people sitting on the wall and overlooking the neighbours below? Not that I'm aware
or I believe of a legacy issue of and complaint of further beyond that, in terms of where they were, and that was addressed from Steve Hamilton, who was the general manager previously, but nothing more recently, certainly nothing that's escalated to us that's been of a licensing condition, if that makes sense.
Okay. I know one of my colleagues, well, let me ask one of my colleagues, Anna James, I think you wanted to raise an issue on paragraph 4 of one of the conditions that are being imposed. Anna, if you'd like to demute yourself. Yeah.
Thank you, Chairman. It says on condition 4 that there's amplified speech for 12 external events, excluding, so in other words, it can be anything, for events held in the Rose Garden and the Keep on occasion. Now, occasionally, what do you interpret by occasionally, and why would you exclude the Rose Garden and the Keep from external events? Thank you.
I think from that element of it, I think it would be anything from, there's people that have got access to the Keep and the Rose Garden in that regard. So I think we would have to exclude those elements. Right. And that obviously from there we do the walking tours, we do all those side of things that again are not happening currently, and not continuing throughout throughout the summer as was, in terms of, and those sorts of things would obviously be excluded from there. Would be where I would kind of pitch that.
Can I come back, Chairman?
Yes, please do.
So are you saying that you have walking tours at between 1 and 2 in the morning?
No,
if that's an occasion.
No, we're not saying that at all. In that regard.
Thank you.
So, I mean, there's amplified speech could take place in theory till 2 in the morning
In the Rose Garden.
in the Rose Garden and the Keep on occasions, which could be weekly, monthly, daily, because it's very vague.
Okay, so I think sorry, if I come back to that 1 second. I think from our side, in terms of the application, I don't think that would ever happen. I think we've gone to the outdoor theatres and the outdoor events, etc., in the process, and made it almost. I think we put a cap on at 11 o'clock into the grounds.
Right. So, because you see, under paragraph 4, if you read it, it says the 12 external events shall finish by 10, other than 3 of the 12 occasions, which will finish by 11. So that's regimented. We know how many it's going to take place and when it's going to finish by.
Yeah.
But the 12 external events do not include, and therefore, because they're excluded, the events, however many there may be, held in the Rose Garden / Keep, where there will be occasional amplified speech only. So I appreciate there's going to be no music, but amplified speech can just be as infuriating if it's at 11. Well, there's no time limit on it. I just wondered if we could think of some wording, or you could consider some wording which doesn't leave it so ambiguous and unenforceable. It's or we just leave out the words excluding events in the Rose Garden Keep, that bit entirely. And if you want to have something in addition to the 12 external events, then you're going to have to apply for a TENS license. But I don't like things which are vague, and I don't understand what they could be.
No, understood. Understood.
Well, we'll think about that. I think I would welcome advice from our litigation, our lawyer, Gillian Carson-Jones, as to the enforceability of these 10 conditions, if she would, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm happy to assist on that point. And just on the matter that you were discussing with the applicant, I wonder if it might assist in terms of our understanding of the matter for him to perhaps think of what occasions it would be used in terms of amplified speech, and work slightly back to front if it helps to envisage those scenarios where it would be utilised. In terms of the Live Music Act, and there has been various changes to the licensing arrangements as a result of deregulation. Those mean that there are effectively exemptions, and that no license is required in certain scenarios. Those changed in, I believe, 2012 and then again in 2015, so that in terms of live music, no license is required where it's unamplified anywhere, or amplified, and there's a between the hours of 8 a.m. and 23 hours, and the audience is up to 500 people. In relation to recorded music, no license is required if it's between the hours of 8 and 11 p.m. On licensed premises, and where the audience is up to 500 people. But in the event of any difficulties arising, those can be made subject to conditions, but only in the event of a licensing review process. Obviously, there are also added measures in licensing terms. The Licensing Act and the arrangements make it very plain that we shouldn't be duplicating other legal protections that are in place. So, for example, there may be protections in relation to the issues which have arisen under Environmental Protection Act and Antisocial Behaviour Act, or the Noise Act, which obviously would be open to those authorities to investigate and deal with accordingly. And in the event of issues arising, again, those would be investigated, and a review, which is a licensing hearing, could be brought where the matters would be looked at, and if appropriate, conditions could be put in place to address any concerns which are suffered. And so I just want to make that clear. I know that the music issues are those which are highlighted and most pertinent to the application, but equally there are other aspects of regulated entertainment, and I wonder if Mr. Hughes, who would ultimately deal with the enforcement of those matters, may wish to further comment. I don't know if that assists, Chair.
Thank you very much. Mr. Hughes.
Yeah, no, I think Gillian summed it all up there generally. Chairman, I've got nothing further to add.
So in a nutshell, there's very little enforcement we can do between the hours of 8 in the morning and 11 at night. But that if there are breaches, then the answer is for the members of the public or this council to ask for a review of a license. So there is a sanction of sorts if there were breaches between those hours.
Chair, may I just offer a view from our side? Certainly from the venue in itself, we would always look to be the good neighbour and work alongside any informal complaints before it even got to enforcement level. So that's contact with the venue if there is any challenge in terms of noise or anything like that. We would always work with the local residents. We'd always work with anybody that raised a complaint, and we do that very promptly. In terms of noise, certainly reaching out to way beyond where it's destined to, and we would always look to address anything on the night with immediate effect. Anything that was brought to our attention. We're not the type of people in terms of operators to be blaring music out and God knows what time without consideration. We would always look to address anything like that independently upon complaint before it even got to any level of enforcement. Would
Right,
be.
and do all the neighbours have a sort of hotline or a telephone number they can ring the castle where the duty manager or whoever can take the message? Because sometimes that is something which can, with some establishments, be difficult to get hold of the right person at the time.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when there's events on in the castle, the desk is manned in terms of the calls coming through to reception, and then that then diverts round to whoever it needs to in that regard. And again, whoever answers the phone at 10 o'clock, 10:30, whatever time that is of an evening, can then reach out to the DJ or to the outdoor speaker or wherever it is to address the concerns. And action it on the night very promptly to avoid any sort of escalation of enforcement requirements.
Okay. Councillor James or Councillor Blishen, are there any questions you'd like to ask of the applicant? Nope. Councillor James, I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's just that if Mr. Littlefair could say again what he said, that the Rose Garden and the Keep, they like to do walks and stuff. He never mentioned that they were going to have entertainment or outside events that could go on till 2 o'clock after the 2300 hours that you're allowed to. So what do you use the Rose Garden and the Keep for, so that we can make our decisions later on, not for the walkthroughs that you originally said? Thank you, Chair.
I guess what I would say is it gives us a flexibility to offer to the bride and grooms, but again, the vast majority of the time it's going to be pitch black down there between 11 and midnight, or 11 and 2 a.m. In terms of the offering. So it's very unlikely it will get used. But I would hate to be in breach of the license agreement for not having the request, if that makes sense. So if for example, the bride and groom took people down there and sat out on the lawn because it's a lovely evening, and sat out there till late on and things like that, then from that side, I wouldn't want to cause an issue or cause a breach. I can't think from the top of my head where as an operation we would be having people sit down there dining, drinking, dancing till that time of the evening out in the garden, because obviously the lighting is not suitable, the ground isn't suitable. It's just we would obviously during the summer months obviously look to move that as late as possible, whilst you've got the warm evenings, and we make the most of those.
Okay, and there wouldn't be amplified speech after 11 o'clock in the Rose Garden or the Keep, would there?
Not from that side. I wouldn't have assumed.
Right. Okay. Councillor Blishen, is there anything you'd like to ask?
Yes. When we're talking about music, presumably, if you've got music outside, it will be properly controlled because it goes for miles from up there. So that's one of the main complaints in the objectors' letters, I notice.
In terms of the control from as I alluded to, Mr. Bishop, from there we are the responsible operators of this business. So we make sure that we'd act upon, and it was at a reasonable level for the guests and for also for the local residents if it's continuing to 11 o'clock in the evening.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions that councillors have? I think in fairness, if there are any questions that we haven't covered that the objectors want to raise, I would allow one or two questions from objectors to Mr. Littlefair if there were any. If you raise your hand if you want to speak, ask a
We have
question.
Mr. Butler and Mr. Lyons raising their hands, Chair.
Okay, Mr. Butler.
Am I live? Yeah. Yeah, I've got a question that I would like to ask because I actually need clarification exactly what this application is. Are we making representations regarding the original application or the application with the list of agreed conditions with the environmental health? Because these conditions substantially change what the application is. It makes parts of it totally unclear. The rose garden has come into these conditions. It hasn't been mentioned, I don't believe, in the application before, but it is quite difficult to find everything in 60 odd pages. Funnily enough, the rose garden, if you haven't been there, you don't know where it is because it's not on the plan. Should this application actually be the application we're hearing now, or should there be a new one with all these changes?
No, the application that we're hearing is the application that appears on our agenda, and as the applicant, I think, starts on page 21 in Annex 2. That's what we're hearing, to which will be added the general conditions that apply to all licenses, plus these 10 extra conditions that are being imposed. I think if you look at the current license has the standard conditions, but it doesn't have these extra conditions. So I'll be corrected by Mr. Hughes or this is Carson Jones in a minute, but if we should grant this application, it will be granted on the terms we agree and the conditions we agree. If we refuse it, then the current license with the conditions that are currently in existence will still apply. So there won't be any new conditions added. So you either have a new license or you have the old license. Am I right, Mr. Hughes?
Yes, Chairman, in principle, I'm taking it. I have to confirm with the applicant that if a new licence was granted in part or in full as requested, that he will be surrendering the old licence.
Yes.
Correct.
Yeah, thank you. Do you understand that now, Mr. Butler?
Not totally, but because
Okay.
I think the conditions totally change the application. We're not going for 2 o'clock now. We're going back to 11 o'clock on a lot of the things and 10 o'clock.
No, we're not.
With the conditions say that nothing should happen outside after 10 o'clock.
Yeah, so it can happen inside till 2 o'clock.
Yes, but if you look at the application, it says inside and outside.
Yeah, well, that is being changed by agreement.
Strange, because
Okay,
that
we'll let you
doesn't
speak in a minute. You have no questions of Mr. Littlefair, I don't think. So can we go on to Mr. Lyons? Have you got any questions rather than a speech? And I'll come back to you.
I did have a speech, but I think a lot of it's been covered.
Okay.
Can we add a condition that totally banned fireworks?
Well, I'll come to that when you have your opportunity to speak. Perhaps, Gillian, you wanted to comment on my previous comments, and perhaps you could cover fireworks and the legal position on fireworks while you're at it. Please.
Thank you, Chair. It may assist for clarification purposes. I note the reference that there wasn't a designated area set out on the plan in terms of the rose garden, but just it may assist our understanding generally if the applicant's able to confirm. I know there are a series of plans, I believe at page 35, 36, 37, 38 of the report, so perhaps you can give the indication. I'm afraid I'm not familiar with the detail of the location. There is reference to private garden, but that may assist initially, perhaps.
Okay, so what I will do is I will share, I can't share my screen on Teams.
Just tell us, we're looking at the map on page 35 with reference to what is on there, where the rose garden is approximately.
35.
I mean, is this in the castle ruins scheduled monument bit?
Chair, I believe from where the private garden around that area is, as you come through that door to the right, or that area to the right, as you're looking at probably to the left hand side.
Yeah.
Around that area, I believe.
So it's near the private garden.
Yeah.
As marked. Okay, well, when local objectors speak, they probably know the castle inside out as well, so they're able to tell us where it is if there's any doubt about it. Okay, yeah. And Mrs. Carson-Jones, could you just give us a situation on fireworks? As I understand it, fireworks isn't part of the licensing process. But correct me if I'm wrong.
That's right. It's not a specific regulated activity under the Licensing Act as such, but I note that there was reference, I believe, to condition within the environmental matters. I'm just trying to turn that over now. I believe at number 6, there is a reference to the number of events involving fireworks, limiting those to a specific number, and the proposal that they be finished by certain hours, again, it would be open to you to consider issuing or putting in place conditions to deal with, to a degree, health and safety aspects, so regarding storage of pyrotechnics and fireworks, potentially to protect employees or those utilising those, but beyond that it would be outside of the scope of this application, and they would be dealt with by other noise nuisance related matters, which upon complaints and investigations being made, those could be dealt with by the Environmental Health Department or other authorities as appropriate, if that assists, Chair.
Yeah, so this is not an application for a license for fireworks because we don't have that power to do anything about that, but the Environmental Health, anticipating that fireworks is one of the things that people are unhappy about, have put in a condition which the castle are prepared to accept. So, as I understand it, otherwise there'd be no general control over fireworks apart from the general law concerning fireworks, which applies throughout the country. So I think it's, where is it?
Number 6 on page 43.
Yeah, I mean, the law on fireworks is quite clear, and that's covered by whatever legislation it is. But you know, category 4 fireworks can only be used by professionals and all that sort of thing, and must not be set off between certain hours, you know, 11
and 7 a.m. except on certain, yes, that's right, sir.
Bonfire night, and when the cutoff is at midnight, and New Year's Eve, Diwali and Chinese New Year when the cutoff is 1 a.m. I mean, that's the general law, and they're trying to make it a little bit more restrictive so far as the castle is concerned, bearing in mind local residents. But anyway, we'll come to that when we deal with the objections. But that explains the firework position. We are not here to decide yes or no on fireworks, but we have to try and protect the residents. The Environmental Health Department have suggested that condition, which is condition 6 out of 10.
Okay. Chair, just
yes.
to add to the Chair, we
yes,
have accepted that condition.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, I think that deals with the application. I'm now going to deal with the responsible authorities followed by objectors. As I say, the Environmental Health Department and the police are not here because they've agreed terms, subject to our agreement on the committee. But I do have the ward councillor from Waverley, Councillor David Beeman, who's indicated he
We haven't
wishes-
got Councillor Beeman, Chairman. It's just Councillor Hess.
Right, so Councillor Beeman is not here. So Councillor Hess, I think you are representing Farnham Town Council. The floor is yours.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning, Chair, and thank you. Just a quick re-intro. I'm the Castle Ward Councillor, along with Councillor Beeman, who unfortunately can't attend this morning, on Waverley Borough Council, as well as Farnham Town Council. On this occasion, I've been asked to speak on behalf of Farnham Town Council, and I'm going to just read from what I've got written up on my screen here, if you'll bear with me. So I'm here to speak on behalf of Farnham Town Council. We object to the closing times being extended to 2 AM, which would cause further late night nuisance to neighbours. For all the obvious reasons of car doors banging, loud voices from revellers who've had a drink or two, I think that would be unreasonable for the people that live nearby. Farnham Town Council are generally supportive of the conditions proposed by Waverley Environmental Health, but with the exception of conditions 6 and 10. Condition 6 concerns fireworks. Farnham Town Council strongly objects to the use of any fireworks, whether they be so-called low impact or the normal variety, within the castle or the castle grounds. Everyone will be aware of the historic importance of Farnham Castle, comprising Grade 1 and Grade 2 listed buildings and scheduled ancient monument, and the fact that it comprises an irreplaceable selection of buildings that span the centuries. And the use of fireworks in the vicinity would pose an unacceptable fire risk to the castle, with just one stray firework potentially causing a fire. And additionally, it would be causing an unacceptable nuisance to immediate neighbours from noise and debris that could rain down on them. What goes up must come down. Farnham Town Council would therefore ask for condition 6 to be revised to state that fireworks are not to be used. Condition 10, concerning antisocial activities in the vicinity of the castle wall by the Great Lawn. 2 affected properties in particular are sited at the foot of the castle walls, namely Rustlings and Cedar Court, and have previously had their privacy badly impacted by revellers sitting on the wall above the properties drinking. Bottles and other items have been dropped from the top of the wall into the gardens below, and it's quite a drop. Farnham Town Council would therefore request the proposed safety rail not be installed across the Grade 1 listed outer curtain wall, but be fixed into the lawn some metres away from the wall to prevent people sitting on the wall drinking. This would improve the safety of guests, stop the nuisance, and also ensure privacy from overlooking for nearby residents. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. So I think just asking you a question. I mean, I think the town council have to accept that this committee doesn't have power to say no fireworks, because I don't think I'll be corrected by my officers, but if fireworks isn't part of the application, then we don't have power to authorise or otherwise fireworks apart from a by consent condition. I think it's just the general law will apply, but I can be corrected if I'm wrong there. And in any event, I have raised the question. We'll ask Mr. Littlefair about that, about the railing on the lower part of the wall, because I have already also raised the question whether planning would be needed, and I have my doubts as to whether planners would be too keen on having a railing put up on an ancient monument wall. But perhaps yeah, but that's basically the comments we've got. But yeah, Mr. Hess, Councillor Hess, do you want to come back?
Yes, Chair, thank you. I do understand from the previous conversation that the question of fireworks is possibly outside of the remit of this licensing hearing. But I'm sure that all reasonable people will recognise that fireworks are fiery things, and an ancient monument and a collection of buildings, it's not like Uppark or Clarendon House, both of which sadly went up in flames. But because they were so well documented, they were able to be reconstructed by incredible craftsmanship. But with the case of Farnham Castle, it's a completely different collection of buildings spanning centuries. It's a higgledy-piggledy collection of buildings. I think to actually rebuild it, if it did catch fire seriously, would pose an incredible challenge financially and in terms of construction. And I'm sure there are people here who are better qualified than I to comment on that. But, you know, to take the risk, to me and to the town council, is unacceptable. And I do accept what you said, that it's possibly outside of the remit of this particular licensing meeting, but I think it should be recorded that there is very strong concern by the town council of such a fire hazard. And it may be that an arrangement could be made with the applicant to hold any desired fireworks in Farnham Park by arrangement with Waverley Borough Council, where we hold the annual November the 5th fireworks, which is well away from the castle, you know, and if guests could walk through to that location, which would be a safer location, further away from houses, that might be a compromise. But I just put that forward for your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Gillian, do you want to speak?
If I may, very briefly, just to make it clear that obviously you are able to put conditions in place upon hearing evidence, and it's a risk-based assessment and on the balance of probability. So to an extent, it is a forward-looking matter, but just to make clear that it is appropriate in connection with suggestions of noise nuisance, which is, I think, why the limitation has been put in place. So that, I think, is a consideration for the committee. It's not completely outside of scope. And I have mentioned that appropriate safeguards could be put in place in terms of how those items are stored when they are on the site. And as you all know, and just to make plain to all, obviously it's a balancing act between placing restrictions on a business and the way it operates. I note the concerns that have been raised by objectors, but it's also appropriate in line with the Licensing Act to consider the offering to the public generally. So it's very much a balancing act in terms of the business as well as those other interested parties and who may be affected by events which are to take place. And I note that reference has been made to large scale events, and obviously we're currently in an unusual situation in pandemic times. So whether it's appropriate or not for those sorts of large scale events to take place at all, maybe again outside of this scope and subject to separate restrictions and government guidance which is changing a lot at the moment, it's fair to say. But I think it's fair to say that we should treat this as though we're not in pandemic times, and on the basis of the licensing objectives generally, and those are set out within the report, if that's this, Chair. Thank you.
Thanks very much. And so far as the applicant's concerned, you'll have an opportunity to sum up your position at the end, and no doubt you'll cover the matters that have been raised by objectors.
Indeed, and I'm sure, as I've mentioned previously, that in terms of risks, obviously businesses would have in place. I don't seek to go into the finances or the business arrangements of the premises in any great shape or form or detail, but no doubt there would be risk and insurance provision for such events. And I note that obviously the building is of significance to the town, and much cherished, it would appear, from the comments made by the councillor. Thank you.
Thanks very much. We're now going to come to the objectors, and the first objector on my list is Christopher Butler. And I think, Mr. Butler, you, looking at our papers, was the first of the letters of objection on page 53, is what you wrote in to the council. And I understand you may be showing us some photographs. So the floor is yours, Mr. Butler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I was probably... Oh, what's happening? You're getting my photos up, I presume, are you?
I'm putting your photos up, Mr. Butler, yeah.
Yeah, if I could just explain that it was just by chance I walked up the Bishop's steps one day and I saw a little blue notice hanging on the fence about 3 or 4 days before the closing of consultations. I'm rather amazed, being a neighbour, that we didn't have any notification before when this application first went in. But anyway, that's why there aren't very many objectors, because nobody else knew it had happened. If we can start on the photographs. And where are they?
Well, it's all right. Technology is on its way.
Okay, yeah. So the first photograph shows from our garden our view up into the castle. And there is underneath the list of photographs, I did explain as to what each photograph was, right underneath all of them. But as you can see, there are 2 people up at the top of the wall looking straight over into our garden. This was not a wedding occasion. This was a photo I took just before I thought we were going to have the original hearing in March. And these were just 2 people that were visiting the castle. Usually that wall will be full of people all the way along, with their glasses rested on the top and making remarks to us, or you know, or we can hear lots of noise as they're chattering away up there. So can we move on to the next one? And that's another view of 2 more people looking from our back door, my wife looking up at them. You can see it's literally just straight above us. And the next one. So now I've moved up to the castle itself, and I'm standing on the lawn looking over the wall where some of those people were probably standing when I took the photograph before. So you can see what a view they have straight into our garden. We have absolutely no privacy from it at all. And it's as far as we're concerned, it's unacceptable that people can get such a view looking into us. So the next one. So this is our neighbour, and Councillor Hess mentioned earlier on Cedar Court, who their privacy is compromised greatly. This was Cedar Court before they started developing it. At the moment, it's in the process of being developed into 7 flats. There's going to be 1 flat where the dormer windows are at the top, which will be pretty near the same level as the wall. So people will be looking straight through those windows. The noise will be going straight into the building. There could be, with 7 flats, you could sort of say an average family size of 4. There could be 28 people that could be disturbed there. So if we go to the next one. And this is my wife standing beside the wall. You can see the height of the wall. I went up there and measured it. The wall itself is about 30 inches. The wire that Mr. Littlefair mentioned earlier on, and I don't believe he's seen it because there are actually 2 wires on the wall, are about 4 inches above the top level of the wall. So you can imagine if somebody's had a bit too much to drink, it would be quite easy to topple over the top there. I see in the conditions there should be a bar there. By the way, they did have permission to put those wires there, and they had to use special mortar, etc., so that it all matched what's there already. Is there another photograph? Yes, so this is another photograph looking down from the other side of our house, looking straight into our garden on that side. So that's another example of how we have absolutely no privacy whatsoever. The one solution, Mr. Hess was talking about a rail being placed further back by the wall. I would suggest that perhaps the flower borders, and I believe there were flower borders along the wall years ago, could be reinstated, and it'll stop people actually reaching the wall. Because although the wires are on the top of the wall, they're not going to stop people from leaning on it. It'll be quite uncomfortable to sit on it, but it's not going to stop them to lean on it, and it won't stop them from using the wall as a table to put their glasses on. And Councillor Hess referred to glasses and things being dropped over the wall. When they arrived in our garden, they certainly weren't dropped over the wall because they were thrown into our garden. They must have gone about 50 yards into our garden from the wall. And that particular weekend that it happened, we actually had grandchildren staying here, but obviously the grandchildren were in bed, probably listening to the music. So we object very strongly to alcohol being served after 11:30. In fact, I think alcohol should not be served outside at all. There are 3 venues between Farnham and Alton. 2 of them have licenses which finish at 11:30, and that's to finish the whole of the event. Not just alcohol, it's the whole event finishes then. And I can assure you, I know that. I've looked at it on East Hants District Council website. And also, we used to live at Froyle, which is very close to Froyle Park. We had a B&B, and a lot of the people that went to the Froyle Park event used to come and stay with us. And if any event went on after 11:30, we were always very much disturbed at night. And the very reason why these licenses were, had finishing times of 11:30 was because of disturbance caused in the village of Froyle. Not just disturbance, I think there was criminal damage as well. I think that our opinion is that everything should finish by 10:30, because if it finishes by 10:30, it'll probably be 11:30 before everybody disappears. There certainly should be no alcohol consumed outside after 10 o'clock. And I think our opinion is that there should be nobody allowed to access the outside lawn after 10 o'clock, because that's when all the noise is. That's when a lot of people have gone to bed. If there are children around, they've gone to bed. We actually have had, at times, through the noise in the summer, have had to shut our windows because of the noise. But we also get the noise on the other side of our house because the pavement goes down right past our garden wall. So we get the noise of people leaving. I'm not going to go into other problems in Castle Street. I'm a member of the Residents Association Committee, but I know there are other members of the Castle Street Residents Association that are going to speak about other issues down the on the street. And I would just like to move on to the conditions on the environmental health conditions. I want to know what the definition is of unreasonably disturbed, which is in condition 1. Councillor James referred to condition 4, which I think is it's open to any interpretation, and anything could happen into the rose garden, which I hope that Mr. Littlefair can get there to find out where it is, because it's I think it's up the side of the castle somewhere. but I would have thought it should have been shown on the plan. We could still be having noise coming from there, and this noise will spread right across the town. I also think that we should be, as neighbours, we should be provided with phone numbers rather than have to look up to find out who we have to phone if there is disturbance. And it would have been, I would have thought, rather a sensible idea to communicate with neighbours before the application went in. I think that more or less covers my objections at this stage, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Butler, very much. Do either Councillor Bishon or Councillor James have any questions of Mr. Butler?
No, thank you. I've understood everything you've said.
Fine. Is just one question. I mean, I hear what you say. Your garden seems to be slightly devoid of vegetation near where the castle is. Is it normally like that, or do you normally have trees in leaf or bushes? Or
well, if you ever had the opportunity to go and look at it, you would see that part of it coming down to our garden actually belongs to the castle, of which we have no control. So you could see we have actually planted up our own part of our garden on the bank, which hopefully will one day will grow up and screen it, but that's all going to take time. But that sort of screening doesn't stop noise.
No, I appreciate that. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Butler. That's very helpful. Mr. Lyons, I think you are the next one who is here to speak. And I think your letter of objection in our pack is number 6, which is, which is number 6, because of course we don't put the names in our papers. So I had to ask beforehand what was there. So Mr. Lyons, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. I live at the Grange opposite the castle. It was once part of the castle estate. It was the home farm for the castle. It's grade 1, grade 2 star and grade 2 listed. There I run a farm with livestock, and I am a former chairman of the Farnham Society and a former chairman of the Castle Street Residents Association. I object to the licensing application on the basis of nuisance. The Castle Wedding Venue Company has a bad reputation locally. In the past years, the noise generated from the castle has been unbearable. Fireworks, including massive mortars, have actually shaken our building, and our livestock has been terrified and panicked and broken through fences, which could become a danger to life if they escaped onto the A287. I believe there should be no external noise generation after 8 p.m. on any occasion. This means no external music or of any kind and no noise from fireworks. I act as an architect and planner on other wedding venues in residential areas, and most of these ban fireworks entirely, and the ban is issued by the council. The rest of it's been covered, I think. I mean, one last comment. Would this license allow the applicant to run a nightclub at the castle?
Mr. Hughes?
Answer or not?
Yes, Chairman. As far as music and alcohol, they can apply for 24 hours. They can apply for it. Whether they would get it, it would be the same consultation as we're going through now.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor James, Councillor Bishon, any questions of Mr. Lyons?
No, thank you, Chair.
Okay. And the final objector who's speaking is Michelle Quinlan. And I think her letter of objection is number 8, which we have in our pack. So, Michelle Quinlan, the floor is yours.
Good morning. Yes, I'm a resident of Castle Street. I live at the bottom of Castle Street. I'm also a trustee of the Farnham Society. So I understand the day-to-days of disturbance and noise and disturbance can cause residents and the harm that that can do long term. I also happen to live next door to which was Brasserie Blanc, is now a pub, the Castle Inn. So I have personal experience of this type of issue. One of the main things I was going to say was on the condition 10. I would strongly suggest that the control and management of the premises, that they should include CCTV in the outside area, particularly where the wall is. The onus is always on the residents to notify the castle and also environmental health. And I think that onus is too much, and there should be every possible measure put in place so that the residents can prove that people are either sitting on the wall or causing disturbance. My second point would be that obviously any event that happens at the castle also has an impact on Castle Street itself. Anybody walking down from an event that's had been drinking alcohol in large groups congregating can cause noise and disturbance. There are a number of residents that have bedrooms on the street and can be disturbed by this. There is also a taxi rank at the bottom of Castle Street that on occasion can back up to the middle of Castle Street. And obviously this would add to that pressure at weekends. Again, this will cause disturbance for residents. Another point that was actually put to me was that the duty manager, anybody that is on duty at the time, as Chris has mentioned, if there is a telephone number that we can all contact and contact out of hours, so into the night, that would be helpful. Hopefully that covers everything that I'm concerned about.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor James, Councillor Blishen.
Thank you, all understood and taken on board.
Well, that deals with the case for the objectors. And what we're now going to move on to is closing submissions. And I would be asking Mr. Littlefair, when he does his, to comment on the objectors' points of view and any helpful comments he can make in respect of that. But the first people to make a closing submission will be a responsible authority. But as we haven't got anybody here from a responsible authority, we pass on then to the applicants making a closing submission. So you indicated, Mr. Littlefair, what I hoped you might include in your closing submission, and perhaps you could now do it.
Thank you, Chair. I think, as I've always alluded to throughout the meeting, is we want to be the responsible people and the responsible operator of the venue. And absolutely take on board everything you've all said around the noise and the people viewing over into the privacy of your garden, Mr. Butler. Obviously, that doesn't change in our application from whether we stay with this one, the current one we've got, or we move to this new application. I think from our side, in terms of where we would like to move to, is obviously the service of our residents and the service of our guests and people staying in our venue over the overnight is a priority of making sure that those guests that are staying, won't be leaving the castle till the following morning, can enjoy a drink with their immediate family or whoever, or their wedding guests that are staying within the venue overnight, later than the current 1 o'clock, which is where the 24-hour application comes from. in terms of that from a residence license perspective. The other side, I suppose, from our element is we'd be willing to leave the current 1 o'clock for the non-residents in terms of where we are and where we're licensed to, in line with our current license, and not extend that to the 2 o'clock to the 2 a.m. With the condition of we can then still service the hot food and the other elements are then addressed, and we continue to work with the environmental health to make sure that the conditions that they've outlined and they've demonstrated in the license application that we can then adhere to, manage and address. In terms of the fireworks, the fireworks option, I guess we didn't come online to talk really around fireworks. It's a separate issue to Gillian's comment earlier on. We do have the insurance in place, and that's been provided to the trustees of the castle from a fire, health and safety and risk assessment perspective, and they would generally always be completed by an external company, not set off by the bride or the groom themselves. So it would be an organised display within the castle by a reputable venue provider, reputable firework provider to events, weddings, functions, birthday parties, etc. And we'd work within the limitation of that on an annual basis. I think that's where I just thank you for your time and for the consideration of where we are.
Thanks very much. Are you now saying that you are prepared to amend your current application so that the various films, live music, recorded music, performance dance, and selling of alcohol to non-residents would cease at 1 o'clock? Yes.
Sorry, I was on mute.
Yeah, keep yourself unmuted for a minute.
Yeah.
So the only change that you will be seeking from this committee is to be able to sell alcohol, food, etc., to residents 24/7.
Yeah, and the earlier commencement time, so 10 a.m. instead of 12.
And 10 o'clock. Yeah, okay. So the two changes: 24/7 for residents, put in simple terms, and the sale of alcohol from 10 o'clock rather than starting at 12.
Yeah. But
the finish time still to be 1 o'clock, not 2 o'clock.
Yeah.
Okay, just got that clear. Any other questions from Councillor James or Councillor Blishan?
Just to establish that supply of alcohol 24/7 and food will always be indoors, not outdoors.
Yeah, absolutely, and it would always be in line with responsible drinking and the Challenge 21 policy and all the other standard licensing factors of that regard.
Thank you.
Councillor James.
Thank you. To Mr. Littlefair, I just want to absolutely get from him the use of the rose garden, because Mr. Hamilton, because if he doesn't want to change it, Mr. Hamilton himself, I think, says that it might have an impact on the corporate summer events. For instance, they have barbecues in the rose garden, not what. So are you saying, Mr. Littlefair, that you want to allow brides and grooms to saunter down to an unlit area, whereas corporate events of barbecues can be held in the rose garden? Because you are contradicting, I think, Mr. Hamilton himself. Can you just confirm what use the rose garden has if we are to allow condition 4? Thank you, Chairman.
So from Mr. Hamilton's perspective, in terms of the event side of it, in terms of the barbecues, etc., as I alluded to before, it would be dark past 11 o'clock. So from that perspective, there would be no lit event going on past 11 o'clock in that rose garden, I think is where we got to. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Well, I think that concludes the hearing as such. And I confirm now that the subcommittee, together with the committee secretary, Georgina Hall, together with Gillian Carson-Jones, the litigation lawyer, we will be retiring to consider our decision. We will be using a breakout function on Zoom to do so. And please mute your microphone, turn off your video, and remain at the meeting until we return. I think you'll keep an eye on the Zoom meeting in order to, we'll give as much fanfare as we can when we come back to say we're back, about to deliver our decision. So, and we may well be calling upon advice while in our breakout room from our legal advisor, and so on. So I think that's clear. Anything, Gillian, you are poised to say something?
Yes, if I just may add that obviously the decision will be one of the members and I will just be there observing and recording and to offer advice in that capacity. So just to make that abundantly clear.
Absolutely.
And if I could just come back in relation to the issue that was raised by, I believe, Mr. Butler, I could be wrong, but I think there was a question about how he happened upon the notice in relation to the application, and we do receive queries about this quite regularly for those that are more familiar perhaps with the planning system, where there is a legal requirement for notifications to be generated to those adjacent properties, and for it to be displayed in the local newspaper as well. The requirements for the Licensing Act are separate, and just as set out in the report of Mr. Hughes, those have been complied with. They are slightly different and don't require the notification to neighbours. So just as a matter of informative to add that, if I may, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Very helpful.
Chairman,
Okay.
Chairman,
Yes.
could I just confirm with the applicant, could he confirm that he is going to surrender the current licence if
Yes.
the new is granted?
Yes.
Yeah. So that's clear. I think you answered that very helpfully before. So basically the decision that the subcommittee have got to make is that do we grant a new licence with new conditions, maybe the same as printed on the order paper, but maybe changed further, whatever conditions we decide, or do we refuse the application as amended? And in that case, the old license that currently exists will carry on. That is the decision we have to make. And so we will now retire with modern technology behind us, hopefully. The five of us will retire to a breakout room. So if Beverly, you could try and ensure that now happens, please. Thank you.
Thank you for your patience, ladies and gentlemen. The committee shouldn't be long now. Ladies and gentlemen, the committee are returning.
Right, we're all coming back, hopefully. Kimberly, can you tell me when everybody's come back? I see 3 of us are back, 4 of us are back.
Yeah, I think everybody's back now.
Right, thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. Well, can I, on behalf of the subcommittee, thank everybody for their patience in waiting for us while we deliberated. Can I thank all those that took part, the applicant and the objectors, and we've carefully considered all the matters that were before us today. What I'm going to do is tell everybody in a nutshell the decision that we've taken, and the full text of our decision will be issued within the next 5 days. And then if anybody wishes to appeal, they have 21 days in which to apply to the Magistrates' Court. During the course of today's hearing, the applicant amended his application that was before us, reducing the closing hours from 2 a.m. to 1 a.m. so that we have the same finishing time as the current license, but with an earlier start time for reasons outlined, and the 24-hour drink and catering for residents. So that the rest of the application is the same as sought, but with the closing time reduced to 1 a.m. The subcommittee felt that it was advantageous to have a license with some extra conditions on it, and therefore have decided to grant the application subject to further conditions, which I will outline in a moment, on the basis that the old license will be
Surrendered.
Now, so far as the conditions are concerned, there are the normal conditions that apply on a license, which are standard. And we have gone through the 10 extra conditions that appear on page 43 of our papers. And condition 1 and 2 and 3 are as printed. On condition 4, we are removing the words at the end of line 1, excluding events held in the Rose Garden Keep with the occasional amplified speech only. So those words are being removed. The rest of that condition remains as it is. Condition 6, we should make it clear that we as a subcommittee have no control or no power to order anything about fireworks, because this is the law generally. It is not a licensing matter, but noting that the applicant and the Environmental Health Department have agreed those terms, we're happy to leave them in and will do so. On condition 7, we are amending this so as to include that the phone number of the duty manager will be available to all residents in the locality, so that residents in the locality have a number they can ring at any time during an event to complain if that should be necessary. So far as conditions 8 and 9 are concerned, they are as printed. So far as condition 10 is concerned, we were concerned about the planning situation concerning a safety rail, and therefore the wording will be in 10. In order to minimize antisocial activities in the vicinity of the castle wall by the Great Lawn, staff will also supervise this area when it is in use to try and prevent any antisocial activities occurring, and temporary signage will be provided, or something to that effect. So we therefore grant this application with those extra conditions. And as I say, if it wasn't for Zoom, we would have thrashed out the exact wording of the whole thing and read it out to you. But because of Zoom and the difficulties in dotting I's and crossing T's, I've given you an ad-libbed version of what has been granted. The detail will appear in the written document. We think that we have taken into account, obviously, the concerns of residents, and we think the conditions are proportionate and do go towards trying to alleviate those problems. As I say, this written decision will be with you in 5 days, and thereafter you can appeal 21 days thereafter. So that is the decision of the committee, and can I thank everybody for taking part and wish you now a good afternoon, as it's after 12. So thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chairman. Thank you, officers.